Friend, you wouldn't want to be sensitive when you do these parallel sessions and you see everybody walking out of the room. But sure, we'll do our best anyway. Delighted to be here. We're delighted to be here. Delighted to get the invitation from Pat and Joey to present in and around competition and development and what that looks like. Again, look, like everybody else, I don't have all the answers here, but I'll give my best in terms of where I think this is going and where I think we're at in the GAA. There's a massive challenge, obviously, regarding getting this balance right between competition and development. And actually, what people are looking at now, very, very good coaches are obviously using competition as a tool for development. And across the world, guys and ladies, is there any ladies here? Oh, one, hi. Across the world, there's a huge, huge issue regarding what people are classifying as toxicity within youth and children's sport. And lots of people have challenged that in different ways. In America, North America, I don't know if any of you have ever seen the work of a guy called John O'Sullivan, and he's looking at this big thing he's called Changing the Game. It's a big, huge project in North America. Again, everything has to be taken in context because obviously youth sport in North America, a lot of it is professional sport. A lot of it is paid sport by parents. A lot of it involves huge travel in aeroplanes on Friday evenings, back on Saturdays or Sundays. So it's a different context, all right? But again, some of the issues may be similar to some of the things that we're going to talk about in a while. Soccer in England, some of you may have seen at the GAA coaching conference in November, I think, Peter, wasn't it? Salisbury Rovers FC had a representative over there. I can't remember the lady's name. Again, this is a soccer club in England who are trying to do something different. It's almost like a movement. They've seen that there's a huge issue in terms of problems around competition in soccer in England. Obviously, again, different context, professional sport. Canadian hockey, there's a massive project going on in Western Canada at the moment, started last year, in terms of a new development model for Canadian hockey that would eliminate some of the issues in terms of competition. 2 or 3 years ago, the GAA brought over Chris van der Haven from Belgium, and some of you have seen that, and some of you may have seen that presentation in Croke Park or seen it online since. And he spoke about a new model for Belgium soccer. And, right now what they're looking at is that, up to 14, they don't publish any league tables. Up to 14, they make sure that the matches that they play, that you're allowed 50% of players are swapped in and swapped out during the game. So it's 11-a-side game at 14. They make sure that there's 5 subs have to come on. And what they've also done is they've broken the games into quarters so that at every quarter, 5 players are replaced, right? Again, these are different answers to problems that are happening all over the world. Now, here's the key point number 1. We can't cut and paste. We can't say, oh, that works in Belgium, that works in Canada, that works in Australia, we'll do it here in Ireland. We can't do that. Our games are very, very different, and I'm going to explain why. This, again, is an academic who presented, actually, funnily enough, in Croke Park a number of years ago, Martin Toms, and he speaks around these cultural isotopes, and the GAA being the prime example of a cultural isotope, and I'll explain what that means in 2 minutes. And Benny's 100% right, in my opinion. We are different to everything else in the world. We are different, and there's other people involved in sports all over the world look at the GAA and saying, why can't we be like that? Why can't we have what they have? But they never will have, because our games are rooted in locality. Our games are rooted in the parish. And when they speak about cultural isotopes, all the scientific DNA data regarding how they find out about people from the past, they examine their teeth, they see what they ate, they see where they came from by what they ate and what DNA and isotopes are left of the teeth. And then his argument is that the GAA don't need DNA sampling to see where you're from. The GAA does that very, very simply. Every one of us here in the room is identified by where we're from. Every one of us is identified by our club, where we're born into. And we hold that dear, most of us, through our whole life. And that is our fundamental difference between us and everybody else. We are proud people from where we actually come from, and we will do everything we possibly can to drive our clubs forward to make sure that we can deliver the best so that our club will be whatever successful looks like in the end. So I think that's the first piece that we have to get into our head here regarding, if we go back to all these projects and all these approaches to competition as a development tool, first thing we have to think about is we're different. And if I can play this, I think I can, about Cornelius. Now, there's no sound coming through this, but you can read the words. All right? So again, we are so different because the rivalries that we hold dear from the moment that you start playing and the moment that you finish playing and the moment that you go coaching, the moment that you go administrating, the moment that you go supporting, the moment that you go making the sandwiches, the moment that you do the car park, the moment that you put up the nets, all those moments from the very get-go, there's this inbuilt rivalry in all of us that we actually do not like our neighbours, as Cornelius so aptly put it. But we still marry their sisters. But the piece about that, though, is that the GAA has to challenge this competition versus development slightly different than everything else and everywhere else. Because the rivalry is what makes us what we are. You can't beat going out against your rivals, at an appropriate age level, obviously, and performing very well and maybe beating them and winning cups and going back in the car and go back to the club and everybody delighted. You can't beat that. And you certainly can't beat this feeling when your county or your club lifts big silverware. Like, if you think about it, and if you look at that picture closely, and I've studied this picture, and I look at the faces of all the people inside it, and I look at them and I say, look, hopefully most of them are involved in clubs, but what does it mean in the GAA when you win? When Liverpool lift the Premier League at the end of the year, please God, will the supporters have that much joy in their face? There'll be a lot of them happy. A lot of them will be delighted. But will they have that level of joy? And then at club level, at club level, when somebody lifts something big, and it's so personal and personal to everybody involved in the club, the joy that it brings, the joy. Again, I don't think that's the same as all these projects that I alluded to at the start. We're different. We're absolutely different. So because of that, we have to tackle our problems differently. You can't, as I said earlier on, cut and paste and take something from somewhere else. It is obvious that we have a problem. It is very obvious that we have a problem. And this is old research, and Benny alluded to it again a while ago, new research that's coming out of Ulster that's showing, and I can't wait to see, it's already after publishing why children want to play GAA and what do they like about GAA, but we haven't seen yet how many of them are actually stopping playing. But from an ERSI study in 2013, this is frightening. In 2013, 75% of children who started playing GAA when they were 7 were gone by the time they were 21. All right? Now that's a 12-year-old study. I would be absolutely amazed if the number hadn't reduced significantly when this data comes out. But by 21, 75% of your players in your club were gone. Now, we can talk about demographics, absolutely, and Benny alluded to this too in these last 2 slides. This is an issue. Now, in sport, you're going to get lots of people who sample sport and give up and go away. That's normal. Some of those people will come back. That's normal. But there must be some reason why this is happening to us. Now, we're not alone on this, by the way. I read recently that in Norway, in soccer, for example, 90% of 16-year-olds who start playing soccer in Norway give up playing by the time they're 16. 60% of the teams in Norway in soccer fold by the time the teams get to 16. So this is where our great strength is. We never fold. But there must be something in this 75% that we can change, or that we have changed, hopefully. And there must be some of this 75% that is to do with the environments and the activities and the feelings that these children are actually experiencing when they play GAA with their club. We have lots of reasons why they give up. Some get injured. Some get sick of it. They don't have enough time. Some go studying. But lots of times, some feel that they're not good enough. Some feel that they can't do this. Some feel that they're not valued. Some feel that they're not part of the team. Some feel pressure to perform. Some feel somebody else is making the decision that they have to play on a particular day or go training all these times. It's not their decision. It's not autonomous to them. And ultimately, as the little picture is there, they get in a taxi and they go away and they do something else. Now, the last piece of this then is where we get back to, in terms of development versus competition, we look at coaching climates. So what type of climate do you create for your children that you're coaching? Is it a case that it's an ego-based climate where we're looking at measuring everything against results? Or is it mastery where we can look at everything in a different way in terms of self-improvement, getting better, progression, commitment? You could name 1,000 things. But again, that depends on you. And a lot of, being honest, when you come to these conferences and there's people talking and speaking and you're listening, you probably gain as much from talking out in the corridor to people than you do listen to some idiot like me. But one of the things that you need to do is you need to go away from these things thinking about, how do I affect how children feel? How do I affect their sense of value? How do I, if we lined up all the kids that you coach here in front of us and we asked them, what's this guy like? What would be their answer? And I think if you do anything else but that, you've done a good job. Because, look, we do have these reasons why children leave sport. We do have these reasons why children leave GAA, but we can challenge them, right? I think one of the biggest reasons is we're getting in the way. And again, it's like that we were speaking before you presented. You alluded to this idea that we're adopting adult practices into underage GAA. 100% we are. And it's happening in sport all over the world. But just take our own games for a second. Take the Féile, which we moved to under 15, a developmental competition. Developmental competition by us. We all heard a number of years ago of a club in Dublin heading off on a warm weather training camp for the Féile when it was under 14. A warm weather training camp for an under 14 competition that's supposed to be developmental. We all see people in our clubs getting on their high horse over the Féile. It's an experience for the kids, obviously, for gear and meeting new people, playing a different format of competition. But it's the adults that are getting in the way. And if you look at this, and we've shown this one before, you can read that if you want, or I read it out because the writing is very small. When we were doing the talent development report, this is a text that came the way of the committee, and we put it into a presentation that we did in Dublin. And it said, training for Féile 2020 starts Wednesday the 13th of November at 6:30 p.m. Training will be every Wednesday 6:30 to 7:30, every Friday 7 to 8 in the club gym for age-related core training for November-December. And Sundays on pitch 2 at 10 a.m. Even though training times are early, players must be at training 20 to 30 minutes before training starts for foam rolling. Get a foam roller if you haven't got one, and stretching. This is imperative for improving flexibility and reducing muscle injury. If players are injured, unwell, or have played with the school the day of training, there's still an expectation of attending training. We will have a separate rehab session for anyone who cannot do the full session. This is unbelievable. Féile Championship starts around the end of February 2020. If you have commitments to other sports or other activities and cannot give a commitment to 90 to 95% of the sessions between now and the end of February, please let me know. I have a limited number of 25 places for this training, and if you cannot commit, I want to offer this place to another player. There will still be a place for you on the B or the C team who are starting training early in January. Some of this 25 will also be part of the B team for Challenge Championship games. Please let me know whether your child is not available for this. Thanks, Mick. Now, some of you are probably sitting there saying, I made it up. I was at home typing a text there. I didn't make it up. It's true. And I'm not going to tell you where the club is. It's true. And that's from 4 years ago. All right? So we are adopting adult practices at underage. We are looking for jerseys with the hole in the back of them for the GPS unit. We are telling them all, you have your foam roller. We are telling them, you need to do this to be on the A team. And even the way he frames the text, if you can't do it, get out to the B team. You know, get lost, get out. The Bs will take you. So, who's on the ego trip here? Or whose games are these anyway? So this is what's happening. But then, there is a movement I can see within the organisation that wants to challenge that. And challenge it in our way, the way we want to do it. And you say I'm contradicting myself now, I'm cutting, pasting and borrowing. But I think this line is very, very crucial from a club that's slightly different to most soccer clubs. And that's Ajax, or as Brian Curry used to call him, Ajax, is it? Yeah. Ajax is stuff that you throw down the toilet. Sorry that went forward now. Ajax, Amsterdam, somebody will tell him someday it's Ajax. But anyway, Bergkamp, his quote is brilliant, I think. There's no need for any of the underage teams to win silverware, really. Now, I'll caveat that with, there is absolute need that your underage teams are going to be competitive. There's absolute need that your underage teams are going to be ultimately competitive and get best practice across the club. And we'll get into that in a minute. But in my head, in my club, I'll bang the drum all the time of saying that once we get to minor, we need to be really competitive. And hopefully, because I come from an urban club, we have enough players to be competitive at the top grade P1. Because that's the amount of players we have. If you do your work right, most years you should be there. And be competitive at P1 minor. The next step of that then is make sure that we transition as many of them as we possibly can into the next part of the club, which is the adult club. And on purpose in our club, and I don't want to talk about my club because it certainly is an example of anything really, but on purpose in our club, we would try and start really slow in terms of making sure that we are competitive when they're 12 or 13, but it doesn't have to be at the top level. By the time they're 14 or 15, it doesn't have to be at the top level. By the time they're 16, we should be trying to get there. By the time they're 18, we certainly should be trying to get there. But again, the stated goal won't be we're going to have to try and win the minor championship every year. No, just be competitive there. Build players. And then the big question is, how do some clubs always seem to get this right? Now, obviously, I pick one close to my own club, and obviously that's Nemo Rangers. And there's numerous reasons why they get it right. And that's what I want to go into here now for the next 10 minutes. But even when we outline how they get it right, again I say, you can't cut and paste that either, because your context is different. So your context could be having 8 players on the age with 1 pitch in the club. Your context could be having 85 players on the age, which is happening in lots of the urban clubs in Cork. How do you manage that? So the contexts are all different, but what we can grab from these things are stories and ways of doing things that we can actually transfer within our context and manipulate within our context and move into our context. I picked Nemo for example because some of you will know what they do. For some of you, you may not know what they do, but one of the big things about them is they too start slow. they wouldn't be really rushing anybody at 13, 14, 15 to be anything. And there's a philosophy in the club around football, and it's driven by tradition and culture and history, particularly the two guys I have there in the photo, Billy and Dinny Allen, and others, Frank Hogan and others who've gone before them. But one of the stories I'd tell you very, very quickly with Nemo, Billy told me this himself. He said they were playing an under-15 game one day, and they had 22 players, and at half-time, the manager, who was not a Nemo out-and-out guy, he was a dad, he brought on the 7 weaker guys who were the subs. So they came on, they were winning by 4 points, and the other team turned around because obviously the weaker players had come in. And next thing, you could see Nemo now were down by 2 points, there was 10 minutes to go, and Billy said on the line he could see the dad calling over the 7 good fellas again. And his obvious reaction was, what was he going to do? He was going to put in the 7 guys and extract out the subs. You hadn't done your job, lads, out you come. So Billy told me, he went down to the line, he told the guy in charge, we don't do that here. Don't bring on the subs. Now, if I try that in my club, what would I be told? Fuck off, get out, all right? But you have culture creators, culture gatekeepers, culture formers who manage clubs. And we don't all have Billy Morgan in our club, but here's an example. So the dad obviously said, okay, and if anyone knows Billy, he wasn't going to say it to him, not. But he said, okay, and next thing he said, grand, and he left on the subs. I think they lost the game. But it was an under-15 league game. It made no difference. It made no difference. In the bigger scheme of things, it made no difference. But I think clubs like Nemo and others, the culture is so strong that decisions that are contrary to the culture are easily challenged. And that's where clubs have to get different. I think these good clubs, right, that we can look at, and I've pictured Lockmore there, I think they're an example to everybody. I think these good clubs, I think the key things they have is they know exactly who they are, they know exactly how they coach, they know exactly how they play the game, they know exactly how they support their players, and they know exactly how to develop players for the future in terms of the game they want to play. So if you take those 5 things, who they are, how they coach, how they play, how they support players, and how they develop players for the future, I think if you can get that right, you're halfway there. And I think we don't spend enough time thinking about actually planning out how we're going to get this right. So I don't think as a club, firstly, we spend 0 time charting what's the philosophy of the club. What does the club want out of this? Are we just continuously just churning out the same thing and saying at some stage we're going to get lucky and win something and we'll all be happy? Or are we actually going to say, this is how we do things here, this is our approach, this is our culture, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to coach, this is how we're going to behave, this is how we're going to play, this is how we're going to support the players? And I think very few clubs that I know spend any time doing that. What they do instead is, who's going to be in charge of the under-12 team? What dad is going to be in charge of the 13 team? What dad is in charge of the 14 team? So the child born in 2008, he's lucky because the dad that's in charge of his team knows what he's at. But the boy born in 2010, he's unlucky because the fellow in charge of his team never played GA. And next thing, the club flips and flops in standard, flips and flops in culture, flips and flops in what's acceptable, and continuously contradicts itself. And until clubs come along and say, this is the way we're going to do things, this is what we believe in, this is how we approach these different problems that are going to come along the way. Until clubs do that, as their step number 1, they're wasting their time, in my opinion. To be honest, everybody, I think it's easier for clubs who've had success before. I think it's easier for them. They've found a way of doing something. But if we look around the room here, how many clubs, and I don't even want you to put up your hands, but how many of you are from clubs who've won a senior county championship? You don't have to put up your hand? Don't. I know you're waiting, just us. Us! Yeah. Yeah, but what I'm talking about, and we can talk about that in a while, okay, but what I'm talking about is clubs defining their philosophy, and maybe when things charted out, it might be easier for people to sign up to something. But when it's in a vacuum, maybe not. And I have only 5 minutes to go, so I'm going to tear through this. I don't mean to be rude. I just need to drive on. Now, these good clubs, they're very good at connecting with their people. They're very good at connecting with their players. They're very good at connecting with their players' parents, and they're very good at connecting with their communities. How wonderful was it to see Na Fianna? I know that they beat Stars, which was very disappointing, but how wonderful was it to see the Na Fianna club in the middle of Dublin on the Moby Road actually come alive. 4,000 members, it's massive, but hurling to come alive in the centre of Dublin. It was brilliant, and it was the community feel, and Na Fianna probably are classified as one of these super clubs, grand, but the community feel was there. Their connection with their players, the players' parents, you saw them all in the media over the week around the game. And their connection with their community. And this connection piece, we could talk for hours about it, all right? But here's one piece for you. You're coaching a team. You coach them when they're 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Next thing, they head off with somebody else, and you go back and you do it again or whatever. In 5 years' time, you're walking down the road. You're on the right-hand side, player X is on the left. This connection piece. How many of your players would cross the road to come over to shake your hand? How many of your players would go to that length to come over and say, Jesus, I owe that person so much. They have given me so much in that 5 or 6 years, I need to go over and just thanks. How many? It's not a massive test, but how many? So, that connection piece, I think they have that off to a T. And again, it might be easier when you connect with success. Next piece, these very, very good clubs, I think, in terms of development and competition, they work really hard at this centrepiece here, this organisational core. They're extremely organised. Everybody knows what everyone else is doing. Everybody knows the system. Everybody knows the culture. The infrastructure is very, very good. You know, processes around the club are very, very, very strong. And they don't think about winning. Actually, I find with these clubs, they think very little about winning. They have an inner belief that it's going to happen when the processes are right, when the infrastructure are right, when the structure in the club is right, when the committees are right, when the managements are right. Everything else will take care of itself. And I actually find with them, and I actually find this actually in general, the less you think about winning, the more it tends to happen. That's actually true. The less you think about it, the more it tends to happen. So if you spend your time thinking about all these other things, the winning will take care of itself. And I think the big thing, this is a study from academies in England, actually, in soccer again. This piece in the middle of the Venn diagram, the operating system. That's a bit that we don't get right too often. The operating system in the middle, that's key. In the middle of those 5 words then, look, I have the word culture, and I'm going to finish in 2 minutes, I promise, Niall. Culture, 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 culture. For me, the culture in a J club has 3 levels. You drive into any club, you'll see the crest on the wall, you see us all wearing our tops, all the coaches turned out lovely. That's the visible culture, it's the first line of culture. The next piece is when you talk to people, and they'll all espouse values. They will all talk about, oh, this is what we're about here in Bishopstown, this is what we're about in Lockmore, this is what we're about in the Pearse of Limerick, this is what we're about in the Pearse of Cork. They'll all espouse the values that they're supposed to espouse. But the last piece, basic assumptions, what actually happens on the ground? What happens on the ground every single day? What do people behave like? That's culture. And to get that right, you have a lot of these pieces to sort out first. Very quickly, these clubs, they understand that it's not just about hurling and football. There's a person in front of them. There's a child in front of them. Decisions that you're taking and decisions that you're making have a huge effect on these people. And I love that quote actually from Ancelotti, that football is the most important of the less important things of the world. Hurling the same, obviously. Football and hurling is the most important of the least important things in the world. So these life skills that we have to try and develop, they're a huge part of this connection, huge part of this togetherness, huge part of this understanding winning versus development. And the last piece, all these good clubs, they keep the end in mind. So if you look, and you've seen this 1,000 times before, I presume, you look at F1 and F2 and F3, you look at the transition pieces through that, you go back to our 75% and the big red writing, and you see here, this transition piece between primary school and secondary school, here, this transition piece between minor and adult, here, this transition piece between talented players heading off and not with their club for 6 months and coming back. Here, you look at the very talented players heading off and everybody in the club being extremely proud of them, and they coming back in, playing with the club and doing what they can do in the summertime with the split season. You have to have in your head that when this child starts here and is in here and is in here, that we're always thinking about here, the end in mind. We're always prioritising the end in mind. We're always thinking the long game. Long term, long term, long term, long term. It's not about today or tomorrow. It's about in 5 years' time, 10 years' time. You're building players at this age, and this is hard. You're building players when they're 10 for the game that they're going to be trying to be very good at when they're 25, 15 years' time. You're building players for a game that's going to happen in 15 years' time, and it possibly could have different rules. If it's football. Hurling will never change. Sure. It's the perfect game. As an aside, I'm wondering, what happens if you were doing football on a hurling team, right? And on the football team, you shout in at the referee and the ball is brought up to 13 for a free. You go out the next day and it's hurling and you say, you fucking bollocks. Will you be quiet? Shut up. 2 different sports. Anyway, you're trying to build players for 15 years' time, so we have to keep the end in mind. Crucial. Last thing, key point. I think in order to challenge these trends that we've seen, and you talk about demographics again and longevity of clubs, we must start examining the quality of the experience that the children are actually experiencing in our clubs. We must examine the environments that we're creating. But more importantly, we must examine, I think Michal said it earlier on, that children now are different. The changing expectations that children have of what we offer. Not the other way around. Not the other way around, because that doesn't work anymore. So what are the children of 2025, what are they going to want of us in 2035? They're the pieces we have to get right. All I can do is wish you the very best of luck. You're on a great journey. Thanks, Paddy. You're on a great journey. It's the most fun thing you could possibly do. And I haven't mentioned fun in the whole thing, but that's the key point to everything. Try to make this as much fun as you possibly can. the winning will take care of itself. Gur míle maith go léir.